Welcome everybody. I'm live again today, and I'm really hoping that today I'll be able to do a question and answer session and go through a lot of the questions that have been sent to me. So before I get started, can you just confirm that the audio is fine and the visual is fine, and then I'm going to get straight onto the questions that have been sent to me. So I can see there's quite a lot of you on here now, so thank you for confirming. Right. So for the last 2 weeks, I've been going live and I've been sharing lots of different information that's relevant to parents who are planning to homeschool, or even if you're not homeschooling, just in general relevant to parents about the Montessori method. And at the same time, I've been receiving loads of different questions, and I decided to dedicate today's session to answering as many of those questions as possible. And I'm going to start with the ones that I received today. So one of the first questions, which I have over here, is it better to set up a separate room for the Montessori materials? So if you're homeschooling children and you're using the Montessori method, some people will have this idea that you have to actually set up a classroom in your house. I actually prefer that you don't do that. You don't set up a separate classroom unless you have much older children. I prefer that you integrate Montessori within the whole of your house. So, for example, you can have practical life activities where the children will be, chopping fruit, or a cleaning activity in your kitchen, or there could be a cleaning activity in your bathroom. It could be on your balcony. I prefer that you make the activities more real and more relevant to the actual daily life of the child, rather than having everything in one room and locking it up and keeping it away from them. Things like the specific Montessori reading and math activities, you can place them in whichever area it is that usually your child will engage with their learning activities. And I prefer, if possible, that would be your living space, because we don't want to have a separate room and kind of create this separation that learning is what happens when you enter that room, because learning is actually what happens all throughout our life. So what we want to do is try and integrate all of these subjects into, our general life and wherever we are in the house. So what I did with my son is I had the activities in our actual living room, because that's where I spent most of my time, which means that's where he spent most of his time. So he will be looking at the activities more frequently, and then he will choose to work with them independently and just take them out himself whenever it is that he wants to do it. Whereas I found that if you put the materials in a separate room, the children are only going to see them and they're only going to access them when you go to that room with them, or you invite them to that room. And already what we're doing is we're kind of separating them from those, the opportunities that they can have with seeing the materials regularly. So I really, really recommend, if possible, try to, have the materials around your house in the relevant places. So something like polishing shoes, you can have that in your shoe area by your front door, so that your child can polish their shoes either before they go out or when they come in. Make it as real as possible. Have your glass cleaning activity right by your patio doors or right by your window, so that your child can see that and they can see the window and they can think, oh, I'm going to use that on the window, I'm going to clean the window, it's dirty. Try to make it as real as possible. One of the things that I notice is that a lot of homeschoolers will go to great lengths to set up classrooms in the house, and they'll buy loads and loads of shelves, and they buy loads and loads of materials and resources, and they'll set up these beautiful, beautiful classrooms, and then they tell me, but my child doesn't like being in there. And often I find it's because actually your child wants to be with wherever you are. So if you are set up your own workspace in that private room, if you set up your own workspace, your own desk, and you're going to be sitting there and you're also going to be doing your own activities and your own things, your own learning in that room, then the children will more likely use it when you are there. But if the children are expected to go to that room and just sit by themselves while you're in your kitchen cooking, or sit by themselves while you're in the living room entertaining a guest or so on, I think most children are not really going to want to do that. So keep that in mind. If you're homeschooling, with your child, you're not going to separate them, because the child can actually begin to create this anxiety about going into the classroom because they feel that they have to be somewhere separate from the mum or the dad. So just integrate things all over the house. Keep the learning materials in a place where you are going to spend a lot of your time. Some people have said to me that because they have younger siblings who are very likely going to take all the materials and mess them up, it's not suitable to keep them in the living room. In cases like that, I would recommend that either you create a cornered off area in your living room. So for example, you can use the shelves to section off an area of your living room so that your child can access that by themselves, the older child, but the younger child cannot get in. That's the first thing I'd recommend you do. So you can have the materials out at your child's level where your, let's say, 5-year-old is able to see them throughout the day, they're able to access them throughout the day, and they're not going to be touched by the younger toddler, for example. But if you don't have the space to create that kind of cornered off section, then you would need to put it in another room. And then just be really, really mindful that, you know, for your child to have that exposure to the materials, you're going to have to put a lot of effort into going into that room and sitting with your child in that room. But it's not really natural if you set up a separate room. It's much more natural, it's much more effective, it's much more better for the child's independent learning if the learning materials are actually inside the living room or the space that you spend most of your time during the day. Another thing that you need to take into consideration is having guests. So if you're somebody who has loads of guests that come to visit you with young children, and you're worried about the materials getting mixed up, which we will be with Montessori materials because they're so expensive, and even if it's not a Montessori material, if you spent hours preparing a solar system material and you've got all of these tiny little bits and then you have loads of guests coming over, you can be quite worried about the material. So do take into consideration that you have to have a plan B, so that if you have guests coming, what are you going to do with the materials that are not suitable for them to access? And one of the simple ways is you could just have a little tension pole with a fabric just covering the shelf, so that at least it's out of sight. And then when the guests go, you can then take the curtain off and the child has access to it. And you can get those tension rods for, you know, just £1 or £2 from the shops, and it's quite easy to do that. And then that way you have them in the living room. They're not being wrecked or destroyed by guests. You don't have to worry about that. And at the same time, during the daytime when there's no one there, it's just you and your child, they're able to access it at all times. So that's my first recommendation, to not separate the materials into a dedicated Montessori room in the house. Montessori is about life. Have the Montessori materials all over your house, okay? And only separate it if that's the way that you have to do it because your circumstances mean that's what you need to do. And you know, there's one lady who messaged me. She's got like 5 children, so she has loads of materials. And in her case, you know, maybe it's a good idea to set up a separate room and even invite other children to come and join you in that room, because you've got so many different materials to cater for all your children. But don't forget that you have to have the practical life in their relevant areas to make it meaningful for the child. There's no point in having a slipper scrubbing activity in a room in your attic when the slippers are actually, you know, downstairs. So try to make it as real as possible. So I hope I answered that question. Another question that I have been asked quite a lot is it too late to start Montessori for a 9-year-old, or is it too late to start Montessori with an 8-year-old, or is it too late to start Montessori with a 15-year-old, or is it too late to start Montessori with my 18-year-old? It's never too late, never ever ever too late. Montessori is a philosophy for life. It's a philosophy for life. You can apply it at any stage of your life. You can even apply it to yourself. You can even apply it to the way that you live. Look at whether your environment is prepared so that you can do the best that you can do in that environment that you're in. Is your environment helping you to grow and you to develop? Montessori is a philosophy that you can apply to any person in any stage. So it's never too late. You just need to get started. Just develop an understanding of the Montessori philosophy so that you can begin to see how it's applicable for you in your life with your child. And with a 9-year-old, there's definitely so many amazing things that you can do. And one of the first things that I advise you to do is read about the human tendencies and the sensitive periods, particularly for the children who are in the elementary stage, and see how you can cater for them in your home environment. That's the first thing that I recommend you do. And then after that, it will lead on to so many other studies and things that you can do with your child. Another question I have is, what do we do if we've given a child a Montessori material and they don't use it the way we've shown them and they're just playing with the material? What should we do with that? So when we have these Montessori materials, we have very specific ways that the adult presents it to the child. There's a very specific way that I'm going to demonstrate the use of every single material. But once it comes to the child's time to work with material, we will allow them that space to explore. Remember, everything that is going on is a learning experience. And in order for the child to actually learn something, it has to be through their own active engagement with the material. If you give your child the pink tower and you show your child how to build the pink tower into the tower, and then you walk away and you see your child is building a snake, or they're pretending it's cars, or they're doing something else with it, it is okay to let them do that, as long as they are not damaging the materials, they're not using them in a disrespectful way, and they are not disturbing other children. So in a Montessori classroom, if somebody's exploring with the pink tower, we would allow them to do that. And then we will only stop them if they are like bashing the cubes and it's damaging the cubes, or if they're making loud noises that are disturbing the other children who are working, or if they're using it in a way that is not respect for the material itself. What you should be doing, rather than thinking about taking the material away from the child because you see that they're not doing what you're showing them, what you should actually be doing is you should be observing what they are doing. You need to observe what they are doing, and then you need to note down actually what is it that the child is trying to achieve, and is there another material that I can give them that will allow them to explore that interest that they have further. So for example, one time I observed some girls in our Montessori school who were working with the color tablets, and those are a piece of material where there's little tablets and each one has a color. So they were working with the color tablets, and they were kind of like setting them up on the mat, and then they were passing them to each other and pretending that they're cutting them, and then throwing them into, not throwing them, but like placing it in one circle together. And I sat there and I observed them. They're not using the material the way that I showed them, so they weren't grading them. They're not using the materials the way that I showed them, but they were definitely doing something constructive. So I observed them, and I saw that actually it's kind of like they're cooking, like they're making fruit salad or something like that. So I observed them, and then I asked the teacher in the classroom to prepare a fruit salad activity for them for the next day, so that they can have that experience of chopping something and mixing something. And because the color tablets are very colorful, I said to her, make sure we have all sorts of different fruits, so that as they're cutting and they mix them, they can see the mixture of the colors. And that's what I got through observing the children. If I hadn't taken that time to sit down and observe what are they actually doing with the materials, I may have missed the actual learning that's going on and have not been able to extend it. So the idea is that if you see a child doing something different, observe them and try to find out what is it that they're actually trying to do, and then provide a way for them to do that effectively with the right materials and in the right way. We don't want to go to a child who's exploring with material and say, no, you can't use it like this. You have to put it back. You have to we don't want to develop this negative interaction or negative emotion with the use of the Montessori materials, because then they may feel that kind of shame or feel reluctancy to go and get the material out again and use it another time because they feel like they've done something wrong. Sometimes the children don't even know what it is that they've done wrong, and they just feel like, she's not happy, so I don't want to take that material again because it might happen again. We want to actually find out what is it that the child needs. The material is there as a tool to unlock the child, but unless we observe their use of the material, we're not going to know what it is that's going on that we need to support the unlocking of. So make sure when you see things like that go on, you observe the child so that you can find the right material that you provide at the right level that's going to support the child in their development. But remember, if the material is being used in a way that is damaging for the material, or is disrupting the environment, or it's disrespectful in general, then that's when you would step in, and you wouldn't say no, but you would try to redirect the child positively to something else that they would like to do. So I hope that's answered that question. I think this is something that comes up a lot with people who are working in Montessori schools or parents who are just starting to get materials. We face this all the time. It's completely normal. We're not expecting the children to use the material in the exact same way that we show them, but we will always show them the correct way, and then we will always observe to see what happens next. So another question, I'm just going to check here, I've got them on the other phone. Okay, I've got a few questions about rotation. So people are asking me, how often do we rotate the Montessori materials that we have on the shelf? Do we do it weekly? Do we do it every 2 weeks? And how many materials should we have out? And how many materials should we rotate? I'm not actually really for this idea of rotation, as in we have a schedule that we rotate the materials that we provide the child with. What we want to aim is to have the materials that the child finds interesting out. And if it's something that's interesting to the child and they're engaged and they like using it, we give it to them for as long as they show that interest in it. So you wouldn't rotate and take away a material that you've seen your child has loved and take it away because the week is over now and now I'm going to set out another set of activities. That's actually not what the Montessori method is advising us to do. What I recommend that you do is set up the activities. If you're in a home environment, set up the activities that are based on your child's interests and based on their current level of learning. If you have a really young child, let's say a toddler, I would recommend you only have about 6 to 8 materials only, no more than that. In Montessori, we really see the understanding that less is more. So when you have 6 to 8 materials out, that is really going to give your child the optimal chance to engage with deep concentration. But if you put out so many materials, your child is going to be completely overwhelmed by all of the choice that they have. And instead of the child enjoying one material and sitting with that for a long time, they're going to jump between the many opportunities and options that they have out there. So don't have too many materials available. If you have a toddler, 6 to 8 is completely fine. You don't need to have more than that. That's 6 to 8 on a shelf. But around the house, you can have things like, a food preparation activity, a window cleaning activity. You can have them in their relevant places so that they're relevant to life. But on the actual shelf, don't have more than 6 to 8 materials. Now, those 6 to 8 materials, I don't want you to have a kind of schedule of rotation, because then you won't be following the child's interests. What I want you to do is, before you put anything on the shelf, observe your child and see actually what is it that they're showing an interest in. What is it that they're showing an interest in, and what material might meet the need that that child is showing us? And set up those 6 to 8 materials based on your child's interests, based on your child's needs, based on their current level of development. So for example, if you have a toddler who likes to post things into little holes, then you would put a posting activity out, because that's something that you have observed. Have those 6 to 8 activities out. Make sure there is a variety. So you don't want to have 5 posting activities. No, you want to have one nice posting activity, and then have a variety of other things. Have a language activity, have a sensory activity, have activities that cover the different areas of development so that your child has an opportunity to experience different things. Place them on the shelf and then observe. So we start with observation, and then in the middle we're going to observe. We're going to set up the shelf and we're going to observe. In your observation, what you want to be seeing is which activities actually interest my child. Those activities are the ones that you want to keep available for your child for as long as possible. If after 1 week you see that there's a particular material on the shelf that your child has no interest in, I would just really quietly take that material away and put out another material that I think might interest the child. So you wouldn't necessarily have a particular day that you set up the shelf, or a particular time of the month that you do your Montessori shelf rotation. That's not going to follow the natural rhythm of life. Remember, everything about Montessori is this natural, organic rhythm of life. So even the way that you change the shelf is going to have to be organic and natural, based on the child's interest, based on the unfolding that's happening there and then in front of you. And that's not something you can predict or something you can limit to a schedule. So you observe the child and you observe the interaction with the materials on the shelf. And the things that you see that either they've lost interest in or they were never interested in from the start, you take them away and you keep them in your cupboard so they're out of sight, and you put something else out. But the materials that your child is enjoying and they like to do, you keep them there for however long the child shows an interest. Because if the child keeps going back to the material again and again and again, that means that there is an inner need that is being fulfilled by that material. If you take that material away because it's been 1 week already and I want to put a new material out, you're breaking that cycle of the development that's taking place inside your child. You're interfering with that. So don't. Just keep it there until your child has lost interest. So at any point of the week or the month, if you have seen that there is a piece of material that your child is definitely not interested in for, let's say, a week or two, they're definitely not interested, at any point you can just take it away and you can put something else out there. You don't have to be on this pressure of having a new shelf set up every week or a new shelf set up every month or whatever it might be that you have read elsewhere. You don't have to have that pressure. The shelf is supposed to be something that meets the needs of your child. And the only way you're going to know whether it meets the need of your child is if you are observing and following your child's interests. And if you want to make sure that your setup is not limiting the child, then you have to make sure that you have activities from the different areas available for your child. That is the secret recipe for keeping your child engaged, concentrated, and always progressing in their own personal self-development. Now, that's more or less for toddlers. If you have like 6 to 8 is for toddlers. When you come to children who are a little bit older, let's say a 5-year-old or a 6-year-old, you're going to obviously have more material than just 6 to 8. You're going to have materials for each area of development. So typically in a Montessori classroom, we have 6 areas of development. We have practical life, sensorial, maths, language, and creative and cultural, sorry, I missed that one out. So what I would recommend you do is you keep your practical life materials in their relevant spaces in the house. Like I said earlier, the shoe polishing can be by your shoe cabinet, the squishy cleaning the glass could be in the shower or wherever it is that's relevant. Have the practical life all around your house, because practical life is practical life, so you want it to be linked to life. For sensorial, math, language, I would recommend that you have around 4 to 5 materials per subject out, depending on what your child is working on. So you need to have the current material your child is currently working on the shelf so they can access it at any time. I highly, highly recommend you have the next material that you haven't yet presented to the child. So let's say your child is working on the spindle box, right? You would have that on the shelf. And the next material is the card and counters. So I would recommend you put the cards and counters out, even if you haven't presented it to your child. Just put it out so that your child knows there's a next activity that they can get to if they've mastered this and there's something they can do next, right? I really recommend for all the areas you always have this next step, so the child always feels like there's something that they can move on to, that they can work towards, that they're progressing towards. And then those are 2, right? So the current one and then the next one. And then I'd recommend that you have 2 or 3 if you have to, but 2 materials that are things that your child has just mastered or things that your child really enjoys doing. So for example, in the language area, maybe your child is working on the movable alphabet. So you'll have, let's say, pink box 2 with the movable alphabet available for your child. And then let's say your child is soon going to be going on to pink box 3. You could put pink box 3 out so that that's the next option that they're going to do in the future. And then you maybe have you've seen that your child really, really loves the insets, so you have the insets out, and then you have something else that your child just mastered, for example, the sandpaper letters that they've just mastered. So I would recommend you only have about 4 to 5 for each of those 3 subject areas, math, language, and cultural. For cultural as well, you want to try and have it based on your child's theme, their own interest. It's not going to be an interest that you pre-plan. It's not going to be something like in November we're going to be doing winter, so we're going to have all these winter activities out. No, it's the interest that your child shows you in November. You can't really predict it. You have to observe, and then when you see the interest, you have to work fast to set up that shelf. So in the cultural area, try and have the 5 activities are around your child's current interests. And then of course for art, you can choose to have, let's say, 2 to 3 activities available that your child can access at any time. So actually you're not putting out the whole array of Montessori materials in your house. That's too much. In a Montessori classroom, we have everything out because we have 25 children all accessing all the materials, all at different ages and stages. So we have everything available, and it works. But in a home environment, it's not necessary to have so many things out. And in fact, when you have too many, it can become too overwhelming for the child. So just have out what the child needs, those limited choices that the child needs, that they show interest in. And what you will see is that by limiting the choice, your child is going to straight away begin to work with the materials with a deeper level of engagement, because they don't have so many things to distract them, and there's not so many things that they feel that they can choose between, that they don't truly know what it is that they want. The key though is to observe your child, because if you observe your child, you're going to know exactly which materials are needed to put on the shelf. So I hope that answered that question. I know that if you look around on other Montessori accounts, they might recommend things slightly differently. What I'm sharing with you is what has worked for me in my experience with my son, what I have recommended to loads of other parents and has worked for them, and also what I have understood based on going into that deep study of the Montessori philosophy. So somebody's just asking what is the topic for today. Actually, I'm just going through questions that have been asked and answering them one by one. So there isn't a overall topic. Another question, the last question, which I'm going to answer today, is what happens if we do not prepare our environment properly to unlock the child? So Dr. Montessori really stressed the importance of the prepared environment. I made a whole video about this, so you can go back to my IGTV and you can look at the video that talks about the prepared environment. The prepared environment, it is crucial for your child's learning and development. It is crucial not just for your child, even for yourself. If you have your home environment set up in a way that allows you to effectively do what you need to do, you will see that you will grow and change and always be improving. Whereas if your own environment is not set up in the right way, it will restrict you and sometimes even suffocate you, and you won't feel that you can do the best that you can. The prepared environment is so crucial to life, and it is such an essential thing for the growth and the development of the child. One of the things that I like to consider when we look at the prepared environment is that Montessori tells us in so many different places in her books that the child is not learning directly from us. It's not that we teach the child something and then they learn and they become knowledgeable in that thing. But actually the child is learning through their interaction with the environment. So the better your environment is prepared, the more opportunities your child has to learn and develop. Your role, whether it's a parent or a homeschooler or a teacher in a school, your role is not to stuff and fill the child with your own knowledge. This idea that children learn because you taught them is incorrect. It's incorrect. Children don't learn because we give them the information. They learn because they actively engage with things that allow them to learn. They have active experiences That's how children learn. You can sit there and you can lecture a child and tell them, this whole thing, and they can learn nothing. But the minute you give them something that they can hold in their hand and manipulate, they will learn so much. So you are not the center of your child's learning. You are not the center of their environment. The center of their environment are those things that they will handle with their own hands, that they will actively engage, and that's how they're going to learn. Children learn through their direct engagement with the environment. If you set up the environment to support your child's needs, to support their sensitive periods, to support their interests, you will see that your child will be learning tremendous amount of things. Whereas if you take your child away from a prepared environment, and this is so sad that we're seeing this across the globe in so many schools, we're seeing that children are sent to these bare, ugly classrooms and expected to learn, to sit still in seats and expected to learn. But that is so far from the reality of how learning takes place. Learning for anybody at any age happens through direct engagement with the environment. Prepare your environment and you will see that your child will learn and develop. Take your child away from a prepared environment and limit them from having access to that, and you will see that your child is not going to be learning much and they're not going to be progressing much. It's really, really simple. Just like a child needs air to breathe and they need food to be healthy and to grow, they need a prepared environment so that they can construct and develop themselves. This prepared environment is as important as the air that the child breathes. So don't ever belittle the importance of having a prepared environment. And that's why I stress it so much in all of my videos, that the first thing that you have to do is observe your child and prepare the environment that is suitable for them. And you will see learning will happen without you doing anything. And what I have seen in my own experience with my own son is that the learning that happens that is the most meaningful to him is all of that happens when he engages with the environment and I step away. People ask me sometimes, how did you make your child have so much general knowledge? How did you make him love books? How did he make him know so much information? And I look at them and think, well, I didn't do anything actually. I didn't do anything. I did not spend hours and hours and hours and hours, giving him scientific knowledge, or hours and hours and hours and hours, giving him lessons and things. I didn't do that. I just prepared his environment. And I made sure his environment was rich, full of books, full of opportunities to learn, full of new things that he can discover by himself. And that's what he did all of that time. My son knows more than me, pretty much in every single subject. And sometimes I even think he knows more than me in the Montessori philosophy, because, Montessori's books are in his environment and he's picked them up and he's gone through them. And sometimes I think he even knows more than me in that. And he knows it because he has actively engaged with whatever it is that he found in his environment that was lovingly, carefully prepared for him. So don't ever forget the importance of the prepared environment. This is our duty, this is our role, this is one of the most important tasks we have as parents, as educators, as adults, whatever it is. We have such an important role in preparing the environment so that it meets the needs of our children and so that they can actively engage with the environment and so that real learning can take place. So I hope that I've answered that question. You can see it's really, really important to me because, when I go to these other schools and I see how the children are put in these, really bare classrooms, yet they're expected to do so well, it breaks my heart because I feel like people have truly not understood how learning takes place. And by the way, in case you're wondering, Maria Montessori is not the only one who said that a prepared environment is important. She's not the only one who knew that this is what we need. if you look at so many other educational philosophers before her, every single one of them, recognized the important role that environment plays. And so many of these educational philosophers who, are written in so many textbooks, if you look at their philosophies, they've said that the adult should not be the center of the environment, but the adult should be working with the child, facilitating their learning. We're together with the child, observing them and seeing what it is the child needs. And in the Montessori method, it goes beyond that. We're following the child, We're that step behind the child where we're actually waiting for them to make the move, and we observe and then we provide, right? We're following the child. This is how real learning takes place. That time that the child sits in a classroom in front of a whiteboard and the teacher is, dictating something to them or, explaining something, that's not when real learning takes place. That's just when your child has to memorize something that they've been told so that they can regurgitate it on a piece of paper later on in an exam. But real learning happens when you are actively engaged and you are using hands-on materials and you are discovering things for yourself. That's why another thing that we do in the Montessori method is we don't try to give everything to the child. In a Montessori method, you don't have to be a wizard who knows everything. We're not trying to give the child all the information. We're just trying to lead them to the brink of discovery so that they can then discover themselves. We support them and help them build up to that, the tip of the mountain, but we let them discover the main thing by themselves. And when that discovery happens, you remember everything for the whole of your entire life. And I'm pretty sure that there's so many of you on here, if you look back at your own childhood, you'll see that the things that you discovered by yourself are memories that you have never, ever, ever forgotten. And actually, I've got one story that I can share with you, personal story. So I remember that when I was maybe 6 or something, one time I was in the kitchen, my mum's kitchen, and I was playing around and I dropped the bag of potatoes on the floor and they all went rolling all over the floor. And I picked up the potatoes, whichever ones I could see, and I kind of put them back quickly before my mum came in the kitchen. And then maybe about, a few months later, when I was doing something else in the kitchen, I noticed that one of the potatoes was still there and it had rolled behind the fridge and it started to kind of have all these little growths on it. Now, I was really young, so I had no idea what was going on, right? But I took this potato that had all these little growths on it, and I was really worried that my mum would find it and know that I'd dropped those potatoes. So I took it and I quickly put it in the garden in one of our plant pots, under the soil, and I kind of covered it up to hide it, right? So months later, there were these beautiful green, tall plants growing in that area. And, I remember my mum saying, oh, this is really odd. We didn't have these here before. I don't know where these came from. And then as we dug, we actually found lots of potatoes under there. And basically what had happened is I had taken this potato. I didn't even know at that point of time that potatoes come from plants. I didn't know that. I was really, really young. But because I had that own discovery of putting the potato under the soil and then seeing how these potato plants grew and how you could get new potatoes and dig the soil and find all these other potatoes, I basically learned how to grow potatoes. That was my own discovery, not from a teacher. That was my own discovery, and it's something that I can remember. Even though I was so young, I can remember it to today. I can remember it so vividly because it was a discovery that I made. So I'm sure if you look at your own childhood and you look at your own, you just try and remember something that you discovered, not something that you were taught by a teacher or your parents, something that you discovered by yourself. Try to remember, and you will see that those are the memories that last for you. That is the real learning that takes place. So don't rip your child from having those opportunities. Don't rip them away from your child. Don't give your child all the information that they never, ever, ever get to discover things for themselves. One time with my son, we were by a pond and we found these little tadpoles, and I didn't initially, this is the first time we found tadpoles, I didn't really want to tell him what they would turn into. I wanted him to discover it for himself. So we got these little tadpoles and we put them in a container, and then we brought them home, and then he went and got a book and started looking through his books, because I used to have loads of encyclopedias available for him. So he started looking through his books to see if he can find out what this little fish that he thought it was. And then eventually he found out that they were tadpoles. And then he was so ecstatic and so excited to have these tadpoles, and they're going to grow legs, mummy, and they're going to come out of the water, and they're going to jump, they're going to be frogs. He was so excited. And of course I knew that they were tadpoles, and of course I knew they were going to turn into frogs, but I didn't want to ruin that knowledge for him. I wanted him to discover it himself. So instead of me telling him everything, I just made sure I had those books there, the right books that could show him, so that he can learn it by himself, so he can discover it. And we kept those tadpoles, and he's watched every single step as they grew into frogs, and then he released them. And of course, once he made that connection and he made that discovery, then we did all the activities about life cycle of a frog and parts of the frog and everything. But I didn't ruin his opportunity to first of all discover what those tadpoles are, and first of all discover that there are such things as creatures that will transform from one form to another, you know, and that was such a beautiful experience for both of us. But had I had a pre-planned Montessori curriculum that in February I am going to do life cycle of the frog, and I didn't give him that opportunity, I'm basically depriving him from real true learning. And unfortunately, sometimes that's what we do, because we love our children and we want to give them so much. We actually end up depriving them because we get too involved and we interfere too much. So that's why observation is so important. Let life be the driving force that your child will be engaging with, that's going to be driving his learning. Let his inner teacher that's inside him engage with the environment and show you what it is that he truly needs right now at this moment to learn and develop. Don't get in the way. Don't pre-plan every single thing. Don't interfere. Give your child the space so that they can engage with the environment, so they can make their own discoveries, so that real learning can take place. And I guarantee that you will see your child will learn incredible things that you had no idea your child was capable of. And just for the reference, at that time when I found that potato, I was in a Montessori school. So I was really much all for self-discovery, because I had been to a Montessori school and I was having that, you know, personal experience. And I guess that's another reason why, the memory really stuck with me, because I've been in that environment where you're allowed to discover and you're allowed to find your own answers. And this has made a huge difference for me now. I think that those Montessori teachers that I had when I was 3 till 6, and I attended a Montessori school as a child, they are impacting me till this very day, and they are impacting my child to this very day, even though they never met him. And they are also impacting everybody else who might be impacted from anything that I do. So you can see the power, the immense power, if you observe the child and follow the natural rhythm of development that is going to support them to construct themselves and unlock their full potential. Anyway, I think I've gone on for too much now. It's quite a long video, so I'm going to end it here. There are some other questions which I will try and do another Q&A. Maybe once a week I'll just open up for a Q&A. And for the rest of the time, I think I'm going to take, certain topics and focus on those topics. So I hope you've enjoyed it. Please feel free to share this video with whoever you think might benefit from it. And I hope that you'll take this advice back and you will apply it to your children so that they can have the best experience to learn and develop and unlock their potential, so they can be who they are truly supposed to be. Okay, take care everybody.